Absolute Batman, Issue 1. Alfred Pennyworth had been chasing one ghost for 5 years when the call came to end it. The message was short, cold, bureaucratic. Report to Gotham. He stared at the glowing text on the encrypted screen, the city's name burning like an old wound. Gotham. The place he had spent a lifetime trying to forget. The one place that always found a way to drag him back. He arrived in the city under rain that seemed heavier than it used to be, pressing down on the skyline like judgment. The safe house was still where he had left it. Small, windowless, dust layered over dust. His own handwriting on a label by the door. Inside, everything smelled of rust and silence. He powered up an ancient rotary light, and the faint hum of electricity filled the room. He tried calling Julia. His daughter's number was one of the few he'd never had to memorize. It had been carved into his mind years ago, a number he dialed and redialed until her silence became part of the ritual. The phone rang, then went to voicemail. Her recorded voice played, a version of her that no longer existed. When the tone sounded, he said nothing. He simply listened until the line went dead. He opened his laptop and connected to a secure channel. The faces that appeared on screen were distorted by static and algorithmic blur. His handlers gave the briefing quickly, efficiently, as though Gotham were just another target zone. He was there to surveil and gather intelligence on a terrorist group calling themselves the Party Animals, an organization whose sadistic crimes had caused a 700% spike in the city's murder rate. He was to observe only, engage under no circumstances. They added, almost as an afterthought, that a vigilante had appeared in the city. They didn't know who. Alfred was granted permission to engage that one, should it become necessary. Then the line went black, leaving only his own reflection in the glow of the screen. He gathered his equipment and stepped outside. The night air bit at his throat. When he reached for his motorcycle, he found an empty space where it should have been. Only rainwater pooled where the tires had once rested. The next morning, in the heart of Crime Alley, Bruce Wayne pounded his fists into an aging punching bag until the world disappeared. The gym, known simply as Crocs, was the last living building on a street full of ghosts. Sweat ran down his arms, gathering at his elbows and dripping onto the concrete floor. The rhythm of the punches turned erratic as memory took over. The echo of a gunshot, the image of his father collapsing in front of him, and the bag tore apart under the weight of it. He apologized to the owner, his old friend Waylon Jones, and promised to pay for it when he got paid. Waylon told him about a poker game that night, the one their school friends still played, the one Bruce hadn't attended in months. Bruce refused. Waylon asked if he'd at least come to the town meeting about the Party Animals. Bruce didn't answer. He walked out without looking back. Elsewhere, the leaders of Gotham's criminal families sat across from Roman Sionis aboard his private yacht. The deck lights shimmered on the black water as the city's skyline glowed faintly in the distance. They warned Sionis to leave Gotham by dawn, or be erased along with his gang. Sionis smiled behind his mask and told them it was already too late. Their soldiers, he explained, were already dead. When they reached for their guns, he killed them too, slowly, deliberately, until the deck was slick with their blood. That evening, the people of Gotham crowded into City Hall, shouting their fury at Mayor Gordon and the police. They accused them of failure, demanded resignation, screamed for someone to stop the Party Animals. From a vantage point across the street, Alfred watched through binoculars as the mob seethed and swelled. He saw movement at the edge of the building. The Party Animals were approaching, moving in formation through the smoke. He radioed his superiors, requesting permission to engage. They denied him. Observe only, they repeated, even as he warned that mass casualties were inevitable. Inside, the crowd's anger reached its breaking point. Martha Wayne stood at the podium, trying to calm them, reminding them that this was exactly what the terrorists wanted: to divide, to turn neighbor against neighbor. But before she could finish, the doors burst open and the Party Animals stormed in, tossing a smoke grenade across the room. The air filled with screams. People dropped to the floor, choking and crawling for cover. Gordon shouted above the chaos, ordering them to take him and let everyone else go. The gunfire came in short, vicious bursts. He fell before he finished speaking. The attackers aimed for the crowd, but were suddenly yanked out of sight, dragged screaming into the dark. The doors slammed shut behind them. When the police forced them open again, they saw an entire army of party animals closing in. Barbara Gordon ordered a perimeter. She swung the door wider, only to find herself face to face with a figure she had never seen but instantly recognized. Batman stood in the doorway, rain dripping from his armor, and told her to shut the door and stay inside. From above, Alfred relayed the sighting. Batman had arrived. His superiors gave the order: engage if the vigilante disrupted operations. Through the scope, Alfred watched him fight. The man was outnumbered, outgunned, yet moved like a trained specter, striking hard, vanishing, striking again. His movements were calculated, but restrained. The brutality was performance. His strikes were meant to terrify, not kill. Alfred found himself studying him with something that bordered on admiration. Then came the brute, a giant in an animal mask, swinging a cleaver the size of a machete. He shouted at Batman to stand aside. Batman didn't. He produced an axe, calm and surgical, and in a single motion severed the man's hand. The scream that followed scattered the gang. "Get out of my way," Batman bellowed, and after a heartbeat's hesitation, they obeyed. Alfred felt a grim satisfaction. If Batman knew what he was doing, he thought, he'd have predicted their route of retreat, placed an explosive. The street erupted. A fireball swallowed the corner where the gang fled. Alfred allowed himself a small nod. Then the voice crackled in his ear again, cold and final. "Take Batman out." He dropped from the rooftop, landing soundlessly on the pavement. Through the drifting smoke, he approached from behind, raised his custom automatic shotgun, and aimed at the vigilante's head. He ordered him to stand down. But in a blur of movement, Batman turned, knocked him to the ground, disarmed him, and vanished into the shadows, taking the weapon with him. When Alfred returned to the safe house, he pieced together what he'd seen. The wings of Batman's cape, collapsible, jointed, uniquely engineered. He had seen the design before, long ago, when a fifth-grade boy named Bruce Wayne had won a student engineering competition with a collapsible bridge. The memory drew a straight line through time. He reconstructed the life that had followed: the prize trip to the zoo, the day Thomas Wayne had chaperoned his son's class, the day a mass shooter had opened fire, and Thomas had died protecting the children. Bruce, a teenager lost to anger and rebellion. Bruce, the athlete who faked an injury to escape the field and bury himself in study. Mechanics, criminology, medicine, all the disciplines of a man building himself into something else. Bruce returning to Gotham to work as an engineer, mapping every pipe and circuit beneath the city, then as an intern at City Hall, learning its bureaucracy, and finally in construction, learning how to hide inside its bones. Every step a calculation, every choice a blueprint. The next day, Alfred tailed him, first to the abandoned zoo, now a ruin of cracked glass and rusted cages, then to a modest house at the city's edge, his mother's home. Martha Wayne was watering the porch plants when Alfred took aim. The shot would be clean, swift. But before he could fire, his phone vibrated in his pocket. A message from Julia: "Never contact me again." He lowered the weapon and sat in the shadow of the fence until she went back inside. That night, he tracked Bruce again, following him to the top floor of a skyscraper owned by a billionaire who never used it. The room was bare, stripped to concrete and glass. Bruce was there waiting. Alfred told him he was shutting him down. Bruce raised the shotgun and aimed. Alfred smiled faintly, certain the man wouldn't shoot. He was wrong. The blast hit him point blank, dropping him instantly. He reached for his face and felt dozens of sharp metal points lodged in his flesh, bat-shaped darts, not bullets. They stung but didn't penetrate. Non-lethal. Bruce dropped the weapon and started a motorcycle. Alfred's motorcycle. "You're not the only one who follows people," he said. In that instant, Alfred understood. Bruce had known he was there from the moment he'd returned. The engine roared. The bike surged forward, crashing through the glass and vanishing into the open air. Cape wings spread, catching the updraft. Batman was gone. Half a world away, in Manila, the helicopter descended onto a private pad. The man Alfred had hunted for 5 years stepped into the cabin, his suit immaculate, his expression unreadable. His name was lost to a dozen aliases, his history wiped clean by blood and training. He had spent his life learning from killers, and when he'd learned all he could, he'd killed them too. The pilot glanced back, uncertain. The passenger didn't speak until they were in the air. He was a man who never laughed, who never smiled. The world had given him many names, but among those who whispered of him, one name lingered like a curse: the Joker. Absolute Batman, Issue 2. On the day his father was killed, Bruce Wayne had been only a boy, small, curious, his head full of diagrams and blueprints, proud of the medal still hanging around his neck from the engineering competition. He remembered the sound before the meeting, the sharp crack of a gunshot, the scream of animals, the thunder of feet. When it was over, Thomas Wayne's body lay slumped across the bat enclosure door, sealing his son inside. Bruce had pounded his fist against the metal until his hands went raw, calling out for help that never came. The bats came first, thousands of them swarming from the darkness, their wings tearing at the air, their screams filling every inch of space. He didn't move. Couldn't. He knelt beside his father's body, surrounded by wings. Years later, the memory hadn't faded. It had simply found a different shape: armor, discipline, war. In the present, Batman's war against the party animals had stretched into its second relentless week since his encounter with Alfred Pennyworth. He slept little, if at all. The bruises never had time to fade. Gotham's streets were his only clock, and they never stopped ticking. From the shadows, Alfred watched him. He told himself he was only studying the vigilante, collecting data, observing behavior. But every night, he found himself interfering in small, invisible ways. He planted counter-surveillance devices, jammed police frequencies, redirected patrols, all to protect Batman from being tracked, either by the party animals or the GCPD. It was treason to his orders, but he justified it as strategy. The longer Bruce fought, the more intelligence Alfred could gather, the sooner he could leave Gotham behind. He expected the man to collapse eventually, to retreat, recover, reevaluate. Instead, Bruce doubled down. By day, he worked his construction shifts. By night, he waged war. His only pause came when he visited Blackgate, when he stood face to face with his father's killer. Alfred followed him through the city and began mapping his movements. The patterns formed something strange. Dozens of hidden safe houses, bolt holes carved into Gotham's forgotten corners. When he plotted them on a map, the shape emerged unmistakably: a bat. Another week passed before the order came. His handler's voice was flat, final. Batman had become too volatile. Remove his surveillance protection. Let the party animals finish it. Alfred didn't argue. He simply obeyed. He shut down the countermeasures and waited. Within hours, the gang traced Bruce's base, an abandoned skyscraper, once the silent heart of Gotham's skyline. The party animals swarmed the tower. Alfred watched through the CCTV feed, his expression unreadable. He told himself that Batman should have known when to pull back, that this was inevitable. But then the cameras shook. Explosions rippled through the upper floors. The tower's top disintegrated into a fiery crown. When the smoke cleared, what remained was a blackened silhouette in the shape of a cowl, the windows burning like eyes. Across the city, in the sterile quiet of Gotham General, Martha Wayne stood at Jim Gordon's bedside. Machines murmured softly around them. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and ghosts. They'd known each other for decades, ever since that day at the zoo, when Gordon had been one of the first officers on the scene and found young Bruce trapped among the bats. He spoke quietly, voice rough from the gunshot wounds that hadn't yet healed. His deputy mayor had resigned. His chances of re-election were slipping away. Gotham was already moving on from him. Then he asked about Bruce, how he was holding up after everything. Martha said she didn't know. Her son had been a stranger since the moment his father died. After that day at the zoo, he'd come home, locked himself in his room, and refused to speak to her or anyone else. She still remembered the sound of the window breaking when he hurled his medal into the garden below. That night, Bruce finally reappeared at Waylon Jones's regular poker game, the same one he'd avoided for months. The old crew was there: Eddie, Ozzy, Harvey, but not Selina, who'd been gone for months chasing the edge of the world. Bruce didn't come to gamble. He came to listen. He laid one of the party animals' masks on the table, claiming he'd found it during repair work at City Hall. The others leaned closer. Eddie, ever the tinkerer, studied the inner wiring and frowned. One of the chips embedded inside was a geographic information system, he said. If decoded, it could predict the gang's next strike. Bruce pretended he'd tried and failed to hack it, knowing Eddie's pride would do the rest. As expected, his friend snatched the mask, eager to take on the challenge. Bruce turned to Ozzy next, a man with as many underworld connections as scars. He asked if the party animals were stepping on any of the other gang's territory. Ozzy only shrugged. "They're not taking," he said. "They're just wrecking." Finally, Bruce looked to Harvey Dent. He worked in the DA's office, knew the rhythms of the city's power games. Bruce asked if the attacks could be designed to sabotage Gordon's re-election campaign. Harvey shook his head. Gordon was already losing. But, he added, his opponent, former Mayor Hamilton Hill, had recently received a mysterious influx of money from an unknown source. Hill called it his golden chest. That night, Batman broke into Hill's campaign headquarters. The office was empty except for the hum of computers and the sound of rain against the windows. On Hill's desktop, he found a single folder labeled ARC-M. He thought of the term, ARC, a golden chest. The name fit too neatly to be coincidence. He opened it. Roman Sionis appeared on screen, grinning behind his mask. His voice dripped with mockery. He told Batman he would give him anything he wanted if he could make it out alive. Outside, alarms began to wail. The party animals and the GCPD were converging on the building. Batman moved. Gunfire erupted as he tore through the corridors, slamming masked figures into walls, breaking weapons with bare hands. When escape routes closed, he threw himself down an elevator shaft, landing hard. He pried open a hatch and climbed lower still, into a sublevel humming with unseen machinery. The control room was dimly lit, walls covered in rusted panels and cables. Alfred stood waiting. He didn't raise his weapon. He only said that the party animals weren't what they seemed, that there was more beneath the chaos, and that he and Bruce could help each other. Bruce stared at him, silent behind the mask, before saying he'd listen, but only for 30 seconds. Alfred told him they needed to move first, asked if he had a car nearby. Bruce replied, "You're standing in it," and pressed his foot down. The floor roared to life beneath them. The room shuddered, walls splitting open as metal plates unfolded. What had looked like an underground control room revealed itself as a cockpit, the head of a 2-story armored construction vehicle. It burst through the wall in a rain of debris, plowing into the street, scattering police cars like paper toys. The air filled with sirens and shattering glass as it thundered into the night. 14 years earlier, on the night after Thomas Wayne's death, a quiet knock came at Bruce's bedroom window. He was still awake, curled on the floor, eyes red and dry from crying long before. When he looked up, he saw Selina Kyle, her hair wet from the rain, climbing through the window. In her hand was the first-place medal he'd thrown away. She told him to get up and come with her. And for the first time since the Bats, he did. Absolute Batman, Issue 3. The Batmobile tore through the veins of Gotham, roaring between the towers like a runaway heart. Police sirens wailed behind it, their flashing lights blending with the chaotic red of the party animals' gunfire. The streets burned, glass exploded, and in the cockpit, Batman's voice cut through the storm. "Your 30 seconds begin now." Alfred Pennyworth gritted his teeth and reloaded. Rounds clanged against the Batmobile's armor, sparks leaping like fireflies across the hull. Between bursts of return fire, he spoke quickly, old instincts taking over, old habits refusing to die. He told Batman that Roman Sionis, the man behind the party animals, wasn't just another rich lunatic. He was Black Mask, the mercenary who'd once sold chaos like a commodity. Alfred had seen the name whispered through intelligence channels for years. Every time something burned and no one took credit, Black Mask's money had been there first. He said he could help. Batman's eyes flicked to him through the glow of the console. "Prove it," he said. "Take the rear turret." Alfred didn't hesitate. He climbed into the gun nest, the cold wind rushing through the cracks in the armored plating. He lined up his sights and opened fire, bullets tearing through tires, shredding metal. The party animals' vehicles spun out, one after another, colliding in fountains of sparks. Over the roar of engines, Alfred told Batman that if Sionis truly was Black Mask, his reach was limitless. He couldn't be stopped, not through brute force. But Sionis had made a mistake. He'd offered Bruce a deal once, and that meant he was nearly finished with Gotham. If Bruce played along, if he pretended to stand down, Sionis might buy himself an exit. And in doing so, he'd give Bruce the leverage and the money to change the city for good. Alfred promised that his agency would track the transaction, follow the flow of Black Mask's blood money, and bring him down later. The Batmobile hit the docks at full speed, tires shrieking on wet steel. The bay glistened like oil under the city lights. Alfred asked if Bruce had something to get them out. Batman didn't answer right away then, calmly. "Pull the lever in the gun nest." Alfred did. A hiss, a jolt, then the seat exploded upward. The last thing he saw was the look on Bruce's face as the water rushed up to meet him. He hit the bay hard and sank beneath the surface, watching the black silhouette of the Batmobile vanish beneath the waves. It sealed itself shut and dove through a hidden tunnel beneath the pier, disappearing into the city's underbelly, into another one of Bruce's bolt holes. 14 years earlier, the night after Thomas Wayne's death, Selina Kyle had come for him again. She led him across the rooftops of Crime Alley, the city still flickering from the news broadcasts, the smell of cordite still heavy in the air. She moved like she was born to balance, walking tightropes between buildings, showing him how to keep his weight centered, how to ignore the drop. They reached a roof where stray cats gathered, their eyes glowing gold in the dark. Bruce asked how she was doing in her new foster home. She told him she'd already run away, 4th time that year. He said she could come live with him and Martha. She told him never to ask that again. They dropped into an alley and slipped through a back door. The room beyond was empty, the projector humming to life. An old Zorro film flickered across the screen, the same one Thomas had promised to take him to see. Selina smiled faintly. Better late than never. In the present, Bruce stood in the glow of Eddie's cluttered workshop. Machines hummed on every surface, wires tangled like vines. Eddie wasn't speaking directly. His voice came from a boxy robot he'd built and affectionately named Al. The mechanical voice told Bruce that the mask he'd brought in wasn't just a prop. It was a tool, a link to a private network built on a cryptocurrency called Black Coin. Every wearer received a personal wallet, and the network rewarded them for crime. For every act of violence, every murder, every theft, they earned digital currency. Gotham's blood had been monetized. Bruce asked if there was a way to bring the network down. The robot answered flatly, impossible. It was satellite-based, spread across thousands of users, untraceable, indestructible. Eddie's advice was simple: destroy the mask, walk away. Bruce didn't reply. His phone buzzed. Harvey Dent's name lit the screen. He'd found something, funds feeding into the mysterious ARC-M account. The money came from a company called JK Holdings, a global builder of black-site prisons. The inmates were being used for something more than labor, something medical. Harvey Bullock stood on the deck of Roman Sionis' yacht, the night air thick with smoke and salt. Hamilton Hill, ever the politician, smiled as he asked for Bullock's endorsement in the upcoming mayoral election. Bullock refused. His loyalty was to Gordon. Hill said there was someone he should meet. Sionis stepped into the light of the deck lamps. He was in the middle of sparring with a mountain of a man, Bibbo Babowski, an MMA champion who outweighed him by at least 100 pounds. Sionis barely looked winded. He spoke smoothly to Bullock, offering money, weapons, anything he wanted to fight back against the party animals. Bullock didn't know the truth, that the man before him was their leader. Bibbo lunged. Sionis caught his wrist, twisted, broke his arm, and choked him unconscious in one motion. He smiled, calm and immaculate. At the same hour, Bruce sat in his workshop, researching JK Holdings. He traced its branches across the globe, from South America to Eastern Europe. Private prisons, off-the-books experiments, torture repackaged as innovation. The newest site, ARC-M, was under construction on an island just off Gotham's coast. He looked at it through a surveyor's scope, standing on the bay's edge. Even from there, the scale was monstrous. Cranes, towers, walls taller than any cell block. He realized what he was up against wasn't just crime. it was infrastructure. In the past, Bruce tried to leave the theater. The Zorro film flickered and cracked, light dancing across the empty seats. Selena stopped him at the door. She told him that what had happened to him didn't have to destroy him. He could make it mean something if he refused to run from it, if he turned pain into purpose. Their friends jumped from the shadows, laughing. They'd followed them. Together, they all sat down and watched the film. Near the back, Martha Wayne watched them in silence, hands folded in her lap. Morning, present day. Bruce knocked on his mother's apartment door, still damp from the night's rain. He told her she needed to stay somewhere safe until Gotham's chaos burned out. She shook her head. She'd accepted Gordon's offer to be deputy mayor. He told her she was painting a target on her back. She told him she believed in what Gordon was trying to do, that watching from the sidelines had never saved anyone. Even if it was too big, even if she couldn't fix it, she had to try. That was what his father would have done. Across town, Alfred sat in a parked van outside an elementary school. Through the windshield, he saw Julia leading her class into the building. He didn't get out. He didn't wave. When she turned her head, he started the engine and drove away. That same day, Bullock stood before a camera and endorsed Hamilton Hill for mayor. Behind the scenes, Sionis's resources began to flow into his hands, and the party animals' violence grew bolder, their attacks more theatrical, more cruel. The next morning was the anniversary of Thomas Wayne's death. The zoo was silent, overgrown, its gates rusted shut. Bruce stood at the entrance, helmet in hand. He contacted Sionis through the encrypted channel. The party animals' leader appeared on the display, mask gleaming under fluorescent light. He offered Bruce $200 million. 1 week of peace. 1 week where the party animals would stand down. Bruce stared at the offer for a long time. His reflection shimmered across the visor. Then he accepted the deal. For the first time in years, Gotham felt quiet, and the silence was worse than the noise. Absolute Batman, Issue 4. In the beginning, Bruce Wayne thought fear was enough. He had returned to Gotham fresh from college, young, brilliant, burning with purpose, but still raw with anger. The city looked smaller than he remembered, and yet more dangerous, its skyline sinking under the weight of corruption. He didn't yet know what kind of man he wanted to be. He only knew what he wanted to destroy. The first costume he built made him look like a vampire. It was crude, grotesque, stitched together from scraps of instinct and imagination. Black leather stretched over metal plating, extendable claws on the backs of his gloves, a voice modulator that made him sound less human, glowing red lenses over his eyes. Even his teeth were altered with false fangs. It wasn't a symbol yet. It was armor for a wound. He prowled the alleys where his father had once volunteered, where the people now paid protection money to a street crew called the 10 Thieves. When he found them, he came down like an animal. He hissed, screeched, moved in bursts of violence so feral they didn't even try to fight back. The sound of his own voice through the distorter didn't even sound like his. It thrilled him and sickened him at once. He dropped their leader, Raph, to the ground, pulled a gun from his belt, and pressed the barrel to the man's chest. And then the memory came. He was a boy again, sitting in the garage beside his father, Thomas, working on his entry for the engineering competition. The first bridge design he'd drawn looked more like a weapon than a structure. Because bats are intimidating, he told his father. People would feel safer if they saw something strong. Thomas had smiled softly and asked, "Do you think intimidating people is the best way to make them feel safe?" The words echoed like a whisper through the years. Bruce lowered the gun. He didn't fire. He left Raph on the ground, swung into the night, and didn't stop moving until he reached the garage he had been using as his base. Without hesitating, he stripped off the costume, doused it in lighter fluid, and set it on fire. The red lenses melted first, collapsing into dark puddles on the floor. The flames flickered against his face as he dropped the gun into them too. He realized then that he had been thinking too small. Knocking down street gangs would never change Gotham. Every time one fell, another would rise. The disease was in the system, in the arteries of the city. He needed to cut deeper. The illegal lifeline into Gotham was called the Orange Blossom Special, a chain of trucks that moved up from Florida loaded with fruit on top and guns beneath. The Falcone and Maroney families ran it like an assembly line, their influence threaded through the GCPD and City Hall. You couldn't touch them, not legally. Bruce studied everything: routes, shipments, corporate shell companies. He built a new suit, sleeker, darker, still intimidating, but stripped of the monstrous affectations. He wanted something that moved like thought. One night he intercepted an OBS shipment. He used a jack he'd built himself, assembled from ordinary materials, an engineer's tool disguised as something impossible. From a rooftop, he watched the truck seize up mid-turn, its engine cut by his remote signal. The crate spilled, and within minutes, the operation was exposed. It worked, but it still didn't feel right. He was chasing symptoms, not causes. Another memory surfaced, his second bridge design. He'd built it with adjustable parts, inspired by Bat's ability to adapt to any environment. His father had liked that one too, but had asked if Bruce was sure it captured what a bat truly was. That night, Thomas told his son a story, how he'd once wanted to become a heart surgeon after watching his own father die of a heart attack, but couldn't afford medical school. Teaching had been his way of healing instead, helping children prepare for the world so they'd never feel helpless like he had. Bruce began to understand what his father had meant. Strength without compassion was hollow. He left Gotham. He wandered for months across the country, carrying notebooks filled with sketches and half-formed ideas. Somewhere on a stretch of desert highway, he remembered how he'd finally won that engineering competition, not by building something imposing, but by combining the best qualities of his earlier designs. It was light, flexible, self-deploying, something anyone could use, even in disaster zones. Safety made simple. He also remembered the day of Joe Chill's sentencing. The courtroom had smelled like paper and sweat. Bruce had been 16. He'd stood before the man who had shattered his life and told him that the morning of the field trip had been the happiest day of his life, and that he would never be happy again. He had said that he hated him. Then he'd walked out before Chill spoke, because he didn't care why he'd done it. The reason didn't matter, only the result. When Bruce came home again, Gotham was colder. The skyline was taller, but he was ready. He built the wings of his new suit himself, reinforced but flexible, able to glide and fold like the creatures that had terrified him as a child. He hollowed out abandoned infrastructure, maintenance tunnels, upper floors of derelict towers, turning them into hidden bases. One night, he perched above a charity gala held for Gotham's elite. The ballroom glittered below, filled with men who bought laws and sold justice. Among them was Randall Powers, the owner of the trucking company that ferried the Orange Blossom shipments. Powers publicly condemned the smuggling and endorsed reform. Privately, he paid lobbyists to make sure those reforms never came. Bruce watched him through the scope, noting faces, alliances, exits. A GCPD helicopter passed overhead, its spotlight sweeping across the glass dome. It caught him in the beam for a split second. He vanished before they could get a clear view. Later that night, he forced himself to go somewhere he'd avoided for years: Blackgate Penitentiary. He walked the sterile corridors, his footsteps echoing off concrete, until he stood outside the cell of Joe Chill. He didn't speak at first, didn't know if he could. He had come to hear what Chill had to say, to finally let the past speak back. The man who had killed his father looked up from his bunk, older now, smaller. The silence between them hung like a question. And for the first time since that night at the zoo, Bruce didn't feel fear or rage, only the weight of everything he'd built since. Batman was beginning to take shape, not as a mask, but as a man. Absolute Batman, Issue 5. Batman rode through Gotham beneath a sky the color of iron, the city's neon pulse flashing across the black armor of his suit. The streets bent away from him like frightened things, his engine's growl echoing through the canyons of glass and steel. He was heading for the meeting, an agreement made with the devil himself. Somewhere ahead, Roman Sionis waited. High above, the party animals watched him move, their lenses glinting red through the fog. From a separate vantage point, Alfred Pennyworth tracked him too, a silent witness in the dark. His phone rang. The voice of his handler was clipped, decisive. They had everything they needed. It was time to leave Gotham. Alfred said that he would. Then quietly, he stayed. He couldn't look away. Across the city, in the dim light of City Hall, Jim Gordon and Martha Wayne stood before a television screen. The news flickered between static and betrayal. Harvey Bullock had endorsed Hamilton Hill for mayor. Gordon's expression hardened as the headline scrolled beneath his face. He apologized to Martha for bringing her into what he called a dying administration. She answered that they hadn't lost yet. She reminded him of how they first met, how he'd arrested her at a protest years ago, and how he'd ultimately let her go. He had been one of the few good men she'd ever met in Gotham, she said. Gordon tried to smile, but his eyes drifted toward the window, the city spreading out beneath them like a wound. He told her he was sorry that they wouldn't be able to light the memorial light this year, the beacon meant to honor those killed in the zoo shooting. He asked her to tell Bruce the same thing. Bruce met Black Mask on the roof of a derelict building, the wind tugging at the corners of his cape. Around them, the party animals waited like carrion, and from another rooftop, Alfred watched through a scope. Sionis stood with his hands in his pockets, calm and assured. He told Bruce that the money had been wired that morning to the account he'd requested. Bruce said he had already used it. The truth burned through the night in the next instant. At the abandoned zoo, the long-dead memorial light flared to life, its beam slicing through the clouds. The cash Sionis had sent him formed a bat symbol across the lens, a defiant emblem built from greed itself. The light ignited, casting a colossal bat against the Gotham skyline. The message was clear. Sionis stared up at it, his grin turning to rage. The deal was off. He snapped his fingers, and the party animals charged. The rooftop exploded into chaos. Batman met them head-on, striking with precision and fury, dropping one after another. But there were too many. From the other rooftops, Sionis' snipers took aim. They opened fire, not at Batman, but at their own men. Bullets tore through the party animals, and when Batman tried to shield them, they threw nets across him, pinning him to the concrete. He fought free long enough to seize Black Mask by the arm. Sionis didn't flinch. With casual violence, he twisted, dislocating Batman's shoulder. Everything was being broadcast. Every blow, every gunshot, every scream. The whole city was watching. Batman set off the detonator in his hand, igniting the stacks of money that formed the symbol. Flames roared upward. He believed the fire would mean something, that the people of Gotham might see it and remember what courage looked like. Sionis only laughed. He told him that he wasn't the hero. The only hero in the story was money. The party animals descended on Batman, beating and stabbing him, then dousing him in gasoline. When they set him on fire, he stumbled backward into the wind, a burning silhouette, before they shoved him off the edge. He managed to slow the fall with a half-open parachute, slamming into the street hard enough to crack the pavement. The impact tore at his ribs, but he forced himself up, running. The GCPD had seen everything. Sirens wailed. Tanks and helicopters gave chase. He ducked into a parking garage, his breath ragged inside the cowl. A squad car skidded in after him, Barbara Gordon at the wheel. She hit him at full speed, the car smashing into his side and knocking the mask loose. When she climbed out, gun drawn, he was already dragging himself toward a manhole. She shouted for him to stop, or she would shoot. He looked back and told her, simply, to shoot him. She didn't. The gun trembled in her hands, then lowered. He vanished into the darkness below, leaving his cowl behind on the wet concrete. When she called it in, her voice was flat. She said she had lost him. On the broadcast, Black Mask leaned toward Batman's hidden camera. His face filled the frame, every scar visible, his voice cold and deliberate. He spoke to the people of Gotham directly, telling them that the rich had destroyed the world long ago, and that the rest of them spent their lives trying to keep a broken system alive. There was nothing left to save. He urged them to take what they could before it all collapsed. As he spoke, his men moved through the city, placing crates in alleys and plazas, promising that the money he'd once offered Batman was now up for grabs. Down in the Batcave, Alfred found Bruce bent over his wounds, sewing them closed with trembling hands. The air smelled of smoke and blood. Alfred told him he had no idea what he'd done. Bruce didn't look up. He said he had placed a tracker on Black Mask, then asked Alfred to set his arm. Alfred refused. He said he would never help Bruce again. What happened next, he said, was on Bruce's head. He turned and walked away, his footsteps fading into the dark. Above ground, the city was breaking apart. In the pale light of morning, Gordon and Martha Wayne stood together on a quiet street. Ahead of them, a group of men pried open one of the crates Black Mask's followers had left behind. Inside were guns, masks. The men armed themselves. 3 of them stepped forward, their faces disappearing behind the mask's grinning jaws. Gordon and Martha stood their ground as the figures advanced through the smoke, the world around them teetering on the edge of collapse. That completes the story of Absolute Batman, The Zoo. If you're still here, thank you for watching. This is my first YouTube video, and I would appreciate a like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. Please leave a comment if you have some constructive criticism, or if you want to suggest another comic book run to cover. Until next time.